Today, we're going to be in Luke chapter 10, verse 25. And I've spoke on this several times. Pastor called me yesterday, or they called me yesterday, and I was like, yeah, I'll do it. Didn't have anything weighing on my heart yesterday morning. And then I was like, all right, God, what are we going to talk about? And he said, well, you've done the Good Samaritan several times, and you know that story pretty good. And I was like, okay, we're going to do that. And I said, what else are we going to talk about? Like, how we just can't just say, read the story and that'll be it. Who was through Elkins? Let's see, that was Thursday, down by the courthouse. Did you see all the protesters? Yeah. Well, I drove through there Thursday, and I'll have to admit that the flesh got a hold of me, and I'm like, oh, God, well, we're protesting now. And drove by, and I looked at a few signs, and I was like, okay, and I drove right on by, never even had another thought of it. Well, I was standing there doing dishes yesterday, and the dishes. She will testify, I did do the dishes yesterday. And, yeah, she wasn't home. She had to go see Dolly. But I was standing there, and I was doing the dishes, and I'm going over in my head, like, all right, God, what are we going to do? What are we going to talk about? How are we going to tie this in there? And he spoke to me and said, you drove right past them protesters. Didn't he hardly give them a look? And I was like, okay, that fair. So he starts stepping on my toes, and he let me know that, just because they're different doesn't mean they're not hurting. Just like the Good Samaritan, or the story, this guy was hurt, and the Samaritan came by and helped him. And so that's where we're going to be in that talking about. Let me find my spot here. And Samaritan starts out where Jesus is sitting around with all of his disciples and a bunch of other people, and they're giving Thanksgiving, and they're sitting around talking, and Jesus gives a little prayer and a little speech, and a lawyer stands up and says, and behold, a certain lawyer stood up and tempted him, saying, Master, what shall I do to inherit eternal life? He said unto him, what is written in the law? And I love, a lot of times, that's how Jesus teaches. He asks the question, which makes you think. It's how I do with Hunter a lot of times. We'll ask him a question. He'll ask me a question, and I'll answer that question with a question, make him think. 10-year-old boys don't like to think a lot, so you have to make them think. And he said, answering, thou shalt love thy Lord, or thy God, with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy strength, and with all thy mind, and love thy neighbor as thyself. And he said unto him, thou hast answered. And Jesus said, thou hast answered right. This do, and thou shalt live. But he, willing to justify himself, said unto Jesus, who is my neighbor? And Jesus answered and said, a certain man went down from Jerusalem to Jericho and fell among thieves, which stripped him of his raiment and wounded him and departed, leaving him half dead. And many of you know the time period. That road from Jerusalem to Jericho was a very treacherous road. It was a lot of I've seen, and people, historians talked about it. It was somewhere between 8 and 1,000 feet, depending on who was given the thing, elevation difference. So you're talking a pretty steep grade off of it, pretty steep road. It's a treacherous road to begin with. now the guy's dealing with thieves and robbers and gets beaten half to death. And by chance, there came down a certain priest that way. And when he saw him, he passed on the other way. So here comes a priest. Somebody you would think would have the utmost compassion for people and see someone hurting and say, okay, I need help. But he walks on by. And, we sometimes do that just like I did, just drove right on by. I like to think myself as a godly man sometimes, but time and time again I get in the flesh and it happens. But just like that, I drove right on past these people. And I don't say all of them was hurting, but, they feel enough hurt. They feel enough that they are not being listened to, that they feel the need to go stand on the side of the road and protest their feelings. So to me, that if you're that hurt, if you're not being listened to that much, that I don't have a lot that I'm like, okay, I need to go stand out here and yell at the top of my lungs. That bothers me that right now. So apparently it's something that they feel deeply about. Then he said, and likewise a Levite, when he was at the place, came and looked on him, and he passed by on the other side. But a certain Samaritan, as he journeyed, came where he was, and when he saw him, he had compassion on him. And he went to him and bound his wounds, and pouring oil and wine, and set him on his own beast, and brought him to an inn, and took care of him. And on the morrow, when he departed, he took out 2 pence, and gave them to the host, and said unto him, take care of him, and whatsoever thou spendest more, when I come again, I will repay thee. So here the Samaritan, and at the time, the Jews, the Jerusalems, and the Samaritans, they don't get along. They are like oil and water. They don't get along. They don't mix. So here's a Samaritan who's not supposed to like this guy, is the one that helps him. And not only helps him, takes him to the inn, leaves money, says, here, take care of this guy. If you spend more than that, I'll come back and we'll take care of it later. And and then Jesus says, which now of these 3 thinkest thou was neighbor unto him that fell among the road, or the thieves? And the guy said, and he said, he that showed mercy on him. Then said Jesus unto him, go and do that likewise. So that's what Jesus is saying. Go and be kind and compassionate to people. And so, and that got me thinking, the story, and compassion, and who is thy neighbor, and ideology and thinking, and I had some quotes here. Excuse me, I didn't have a whole lot of time to print stuff off and everything, so I took screenshots with my phone. But I'll give you a quote. I don't know who here's a historian buff who likes history. Maybe they can answer it. Brittany, you can't say because I done told her. And the quote, one quote I found, as a Christian, I have no duty to allow myself to be cheated, but I have the duty to be a fighter for truth and justice. Who you think said that? Batman? Furthest thing from the truth. That quote was made by Adolf Hitler. So, do not agree with hardly anything the man said or done in his lifetime. The evil that the man produced. And I know my granddad would not, how do I say that politely? Would not save him if he was drowning, kind of deal. But here he had some quote that we could agree on. And I'm like, really? No, there's no way. No way that we could even find common ground. So I found another quote. I was just going through these quotes. And to me, it was interesting how these different people's thoughts and actions and just the way everything they did construes our thinking a little bit, I guess you would say. And this one, the Christian God is a being of terrific character. He said cruel, vindictive, capricious, and unjust. Anybody have a guess who said that one? Huh? Thomas Jefferson. One of the founding fathers of this country, which, did I save it? I found this little thing. Thomas Jefferson professed Christianisms, a belief in the morals taught by Jesus of Nazarene, but rejected Jesus' divinity, resurrection, anointment, and biblical miracles. So somebody that I thought I would align a lot with, Thomas Jefferson, because he's a great patriot, had a quote like that he didn't, and so it'd be really hard for me now to sit down with Thomas Jefferson, because I truly believe that Jesus died on the cross for our sins, was resurrected 3 days later, and came back, and one day he's going to return, and we're going to live a pretty happy life. But Thomas Jefferson didn't think that. But me and Thomas Jefferson could probably sit down and talk a lot about patriotism and sit there and have some common ground. I don't know if I'd want to sit in the same room as Adolf Hitler. But looking at some of his quotes, if I didn't know the other things that he did, I would sit right down with that person and say, oh yeah, that's Christianity. We have a duty to do this. And I would sit right there with him, not seeing his actions, knowing the whole story. So that's what got me thinking. Well, I don't know the whole story of those people standing on the side of the road protesting. I don't know their story. Me and Brittany's been getting into watching a show called SWAT. I don't know if anybody has watched it. I like it because it makes me think. It makes me go outside my normal way of thinking. There's social issues, there's racial issues, there's some, Christianity versus other issues that are talked about on there, and it makes me think, and it makes me not say question my morals, but it makes me listen to the other side. It makes me want to listen to them and empathize with them and say, okay, what's going on? Where can we find common ground? Where's the balance in it? And but I think we need that. In the world that we're in today, how many of us sit and look at the other side, our enemies or even our neighbors, and we look at them and we say, I ain't talking to them. Their way of thinking is wrong. I'm right. And how many of us know how to be a good listener? being married for almost 8 years now has taught me that even in marriage, you have to listen. You have to take that person's thoughts and feelings into consideration. I know it's difficult sometimes. I don't know if anybody knows my wife. She's very headstrong. She lets her opinion be known. I don't really have to ask sometimes. But I know. I love you. But she could contest when we first got together and was getting married that I didn't think not say I didn't think of what her feelings were, but I had very strong my opinions, and this is the way I want to do things, or this is very polar opposites. I'm the man of the house. This is what we're supposed to do. I'm supposed to do this. But then, almost 8 years later, it's a team. It's not just what I want. It's what she wants. We come together. We might conflict. We might have some discussions, but we try to come together on things. So I found some things here that, to be a good listener. It says someone who pays full attention, shows empathy, and responds thoughtfully, appropriately, demonstrating that they are truly engaged in the conversation and understanding the speaker's message. And that could go through whether we're having a talk on Christianity, if we're trying to convey our message over, if we're wanting to get our thoughts and beliefs to be known. We have to be a good listener before we have to gain empathy with that person before we can just go and say, what you're doing is wrong and this is it, and you're going to hell if you don't do this, and this is the law. If you go into a conversation like that, the other side's going to close up, and it's just going to be a fight, and that's all it's ever going to be. Same way with marriage. If you go in there and this is the way it's going to be, it's good. They're going to clam up. There's going to be a fight. And we laughed. I don't know anybody in here that went. We went to the men's conference. We used to go. 3 years in a row. We went to the men's conference down in Virginia. We got to see a lot of great speakers. I can't remember the guy's name that spoke, but he was speaking, and he said, go home and tell your wife that she needs to submit like the Bible tells you. And I was like, no, no way. I was like, I could just, and that's what George, he said, I'd like to see you walk in the house and tell Brittany she needs to submit. And I was like, I'm not that stupid. I said, I know how that's going to go. So we have to be a little bit more cautious with our things. And then I looked up how to effectively get your feelings across. Be mindful of your language. Use I statements. Choose the right time and place and practice active listening and ensure understanding. So that's when you go in to have a conversation, you have to be, this person's hurting, so you have to have active conversation, not just going in and saying this is how it's going to be or this is it. That person's hurting. You need to understand why. You need to come in and at it and say, have the mindset, I want to understand why this person is hurting or feels the way that they feel. And as if God didn't step on my toes enough with Christianity and being a husband and wife yesterday, he also told me, he said, what about your kids? And I was like, what? Your kids have feelings. They have an understanding, and they have thoughts and feelings, and just like my wife, I need to be an active listener with my kids. And just because that they don't understand things that I understand, or I understand things that, but there's things that they understand that I don't understand. I don't know if you've heard 10-year-olds talk anymore, but I don't understand half of what they say. So when you have conversations with your kids, you have to go into it with an understanding and an open mind and listen and try to get them to do the same. You teach them how to own their feelings. I know we try to do it with Hunter a lot, is own your feelings. Tell me what you're feeling. Because especially boys, they don't want to open up. They think it's, degrading a little bit or not very masculine to open up and listen to let their feelings be known. So when that's what God was saying. He was stepping on my toes a lot yesterday, and I was like, okay, I'm listening. All right. And then God told me, he said, with the story of the Good Samaritan, I believe Jesus knew one thing. And when he told people, to go out and be, sorry, flies landing on me, to be neighborly and to love thy neighbor as you do yourself. Jesus, he knew that ain't ever going to happen. Not fully, not 100%. That's the full definition, or that's the true definition of sin, to fall short of the glory of God. There was only one person that didn't, and that was Jesus. So, but he knew that. That's why he had to die on the cross. He knew that we wasn't going to be able to be neighborly to everybody that walked down the street. Adolf Hitler. He knew there was going to be people like Jeffrey Dahmer. People have heard of him and the evil stuff that he did. Ted Bundy. Jesus knew that those people was going to exist, did exist, existed before. So that's why he had to do what happened. And I have some other names here. People who would want to sit down with Jeffrey Dahmer. No, I wouldn't. He brings out the worst in me, and I'd probably not be able to. One of us wasn't leaving that room. But ladies, who would George Clooney? Anyone here like George Clooney? Used to? Not saying he's completely evil, but I was researching people that, didn't align with my beliefs. But people, and I wrote down some things that people I thought would align with my beliefs, or thought that I would, and that was, one of them come up, George Clooney, and I always thought, he's a great actor. Loved some of his movies. But he's an atheist, and he spoke out some against, not necessarily against Christianity, but he just spoke out as an atheist. Brad Pitt, another one, he would love a lot of his movies. Watched many of his movies, and I'm like sitting there thinking, this is somebody I could look up to. But no, he comes out as an atheist, and I'm like, oh. these people aren't aligning with my theology here. And so it always makes you have to think they're not always going to align with your theology. People aren't always going to listen to or be of the exact same mindset you are. So when we go and see protesters along the road, or we're in a Senate session, let's go for politicians, we're in a Senate session, not every senator sitting in that seat, in those seats, agree with each other. So we have to be mindful, okay, they have a different belief than I do, but we're going to talk and we're going to have a conversation. And I'm going to live the best life that I can. I'm going to try to walk as close to Christ as I can to show them what it's like. And I think that is the best we can do, is to walk as close to Christ as you can, live the best Christian life that you can, be the best neighbor that you can, and hopefully someone pays attention to you and is like, what's this person doing? I want to be like that person. They got something going on right in their life, and I want to know what it is. So I think that is one of the best things that we could do. And let it be known why that you are walking this line. Let it be known. So I believe in the Almighty Christ. Again, he died for my sins, was resurrected. Let it be known. Don't hide it. Let it be known. And maybe somebody will pay attention to you and want to have a conversation with you. And maybe one day we'll find some sort of common ground when Jesus returns and we could all live together and be happy. Let's see here, did I have any other quotes here? Here's one of the last quotes that I have. Any other historian buffs? In the end, will you remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends? Anybody guess? Martin Luther King Jr. That speaks a lot to me. You're not going to remember what your enemy said. You remember that I had a friend that didn't help me, didn't say anything to me. My lesson there a couple of weeks ago, whenever it was, and again, I hope that the number doesn't ever go up, but 22 veterans a day take their life because of something, PTSD, or they can't make it or anything, and they're hurting. In the silence of their friends not saying, hey, what's going on? Can we help? And be there. And you don't have to have that conversation, Could be just simple as saying, hey, how's your day? How's it going? So, being a friend, and just because somebody is not physically hurt, but they may be mentally hurt, to me it's the same thing. If you're walking past somebody and you can visibly see that they're hurting, and you don't stop and at least try to brighten their day just a little bit. You're no better. I would say you're no better than. It's no different than the priest walking right by the man laying along the road. If someone's physically hurt, we need to, or mentally hurt, their feelings are hurt. We need to start that conversation. It's okay to talk about feelings. Before, Brittany, did you want to talk about it? We'll do it after that. Okay, we'll do the first time doing the benediction. Every head bowed and every eye is closed. We just want to, anybody that knows of somebody that's hurting, that they want to pray about. I don't know if you want to come to the altar and pray, or anybody that's mentally hurting or needs prayer, needs someone to talk to, needs a friend. You come up to the altar and we'll pray with you. We'll be there. We say anybody who's wants to give their life to Christ today and say, Lord, I need you. I know that's how it happened for me. I was hurting. I was there and down, and I knew nobody other than Christ could heal my hurt. So sitting there along the roadside, asked him for forgiveness, asked him to be with me.